All right, joining me now is Dr. Ifeoma Nwokolo, Assistant Vice President and Head of Research, Financial Derivatives Company. Great to have you on the show, ma. Good morning.
Good morning, laddie. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So, yes, definitely, I need to get the verdict from the FDC. What are we expecting? How big is this cut going to be?
Yeah, I would say that the jury is out as to what magnitude of cut we are going to see today. And this is dependent on their satisfaction on certain indicators. So there's going to be a cut, and the market has already factored that in. We saw that happening in most of the market. We saw the reaction in most of the initial reaction in most of the markets. And what the indicators they are going to be looking at is, one, the inflation will be considered. And we know that for 10 consecutive straight months now we are seeing disinflation, and that is in annual inflation reports for this month. For January, we saw disinflation in all the annual inflation reports that we saw in January, and the monthly inflation report showed a deflation. So these factors will be considered in the meeting today. Another factor that we considered is the money supply growth. Money supply growth has been on the decline. In December, it was about 8%, and in January, we saw a decline to about 9%. So another factor too that they'll be looking at is the gross external reserve, which has reached its highest, almost approaching $49 billion. And exchange rate has been quite stable. This is another factor that will be considered, even though we saw a 3% decline as at yesterday, sharp decline yesterday because of market speculation. The market is expecting a cut, but we don't know the magnitude of cut. At our own end, we are looking at a 25 to 50 basis point cut today. I would say a best case scenario of 25, and then a base case scenario of 50, a worst case scenario of 100. A lot of analysts are already emphasizing a 100 basis point cut, and Goldman Sachs this morning came up with a 150 basis point cut, which I'm sure that the CBN is going to be cautious in their cut, because any aggressive rate cut is going to lead to a capital flight, and we wouldn't want that. Already we have seen the naira reacting because it is normal. It's not peculiar to Nigeria alone. Whenever the CBN of any country wants to take any concrete decision, you see the market always reacts, either negatively or positively, and that's what we are saying this morning. So we are looking at a 25 to 50 basis points this morning, not a 150, not 100. There will be no aggressive cuts.
Right. So I guess the surprise could be if we get 100 or 150 basis points cut today. But definitely when you look at other economies, when the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, cuts interest rates, we see the impact on the currency of the country. A cut normally leads to a weakening for the currency, and a hike normally leads to a strengthening for the currency. So with a cut today, what should we expect for the naira?
Okay, with a cut today, of course, you said it. Once there's a cut in interest rates, you see FPI outflows, and also you see the naira weakens. The naira weakens, and we know that if there's a cut, so it depends on the magnitude of cuts. If it's aggressive, you will see the naira depreciate sharply, and it may erode all the gains we have gotten so far. But if we see a 25 to 50 basis point cut, I don't think it's going to weaken the naira, but not as sharp as if it were 100 or 150 basis points. So we should be expecting, if there's a cut, we should be expecting depreciation in the naira. Yes.
Right. And definitely when the naira got sub 1,400 to the dollar, there was talk about people that have been holding on to their dollars. They were getting quite nervous. So I guess if we see an aggressive cut, that group can breathe a sigh of relief. Saying that, okay, what, maybe we might see some weakness with the naira. But let's pivot now to the Dangote Refinery, the biggest listing expectation, I guess, for this year on the stock market. With the refinery targeting second quarter of 2026 to list. How prepared is the company and the market for what could be one of the largest IPOs in Nigeria's history?
I think Dangote has mentioned this earlier last year, that the company will be listed in 2026. And I know that before this could come up to the public, I know that the company must have been having discussions with the NGX, which I'm very sure, before they could put it out, to give us an expected time between 3 to 5 months time, which is basically in Q2. So I think the discussion is ongoing. They can't just pop up to the public if the discussion is not ongoing. And I think Dangote himself mentioned it, that in 3 to 5 months time, we'll see it being listed. If they are not prepared, of course, I know they won't do that. You know that the Dangote Refinery has gotten to its full capacity of 650,000 barrels per day. So I think they are ready and they are prepared for it, and we are expectant.
Right, and we know the refinery already valued over about $23 billion. Recently. What valuation range do you expect for the Dangote Refinery listing? How might that compare with other major issuances on the NGX? A word on the street is that the market capitalization will be really high, and maybe the stock price might be high too.
So I'll say the initial listing is going to be a partial listing of maybe 5 to 10% listing, and if that happens, 5 to 10% listing of about $23 billion is a huge one, and it's going to I call it a golden stock. It's going to be a golden stock that's going to have a significant shift in the stock market, which will push the stock market from a 112 trillion that we have today to almost 200 trillion. And comparing it to other IPOs that we have, I think it's really going to dwarf other IPOs that are huge IPOs as it is now, like MTN and Airtel and other banking IPOs. I know that this will be it will be way higher than this. If you look at MTN has a listing of about 1.2 billion, if I'm not mistaken, and Airtel around $1 billion listing. So a 2.3 or 2.5 billion dollar listing in the market is going to be a huge one. I'm going to see liquidity deepening in that market. I'm going to see a lot of investment, both institutional investment and then foreign investors will come in. I think it's going to be a huge one for the market.
Right. Everyone's bracing for this one now. But how do you think this listing could influence, liquidity, sector interest, on the Nigerian equities market?
Well, I think that the listing is going to encourage investment, foreign investment, because if the dividend is going to be paid in dollars, of course, I know a lot of foreign investors will want to come in. And once that happens, we are going to have our naira is going to appreciate, because we have a lot of influx into that sector, and other people too, even other sectors. I don't think it's going to have a negative. It's going to have a positive impact on the energy sector, because it's going to improve the sector the more, which is the energy sector. And a lot of individuals, even you and I, Ladi, I know you are waiting for this listing. So a lot of people confidence of Nigerians to invest in that particular stock. Yeah, I think everybody is expectant.
Yeah, I pray I have money to invest in it, when it comes out. But let's just imagine, the Dangote Refinery, is listed now on the stock market. Maybe it's been listed for about 2 months or 3 months. What do you think would impact the share price of the Dangote Refinery? Would investors be looking at, because I'm imagining investors will be looking at, the changes in oil prices that might, influence the share price. Is that your thinking?
I think it's going to have it's going to play a role, because we're going to have some risk, market risk. That's going to be one of the market risks we are going to have, because the pricing is going to be dependent, or the revenue, or let me say, the dividends you are going to get at the end of the day, even if you invest, is going to be dependent on the global oil glut, or a global oil price will be a major determinant of this particular. And again, that it's going to be a partial listing, so the volatility may be high, because he is keeping 90% to himself and giving out between 5 to, let me say, maximum of 10% to the public. So these are some of the risks that will be considered. I know, yes, especially oil price is very important. So a fluctuation in oil price is really going to determine how the stock market is going to play out. But if you look at the gains too, because according to Dangote, dividend is going to be paid in dollars. I think whatever it is, that is, a dollar is safe haven. So everybody wants to, okay, let me invest and at least have my dividends in dollar.
Right.
Not minding the risk.
Right. But I want my dividend in naira. I want more demand for the naira. That's me personally. All right. Well, we see the
dollar or naira, whichever way, I think.
Yeah, but I'll take the naira over the dollar at this point.
Okay.
All right, so we see the NNPCL. I think they have about 7% stake in the refinery. But, what are you seeing this week? It's still geopolitics, driving sentiment in the global oil market. Brent seems to be getting more comfortable, over $70 per barrel. Do you see that continuing this week?
Yeah, what we are currently seeing is not that we have oversupply, but it's because of the geopolitical tension. I call it geopolitical noise between Trump and US and Iran. And if there's a true talk between them, I think we're going to see a sharp decline. But if the talk between both of them is not convenient, I think we're going to see a sharp increase. So whatever the price of PMS, whatever the price of the global oil is going to be this week, is dependent on the talk between Iran and the US. So there's no specific, so it's a two-way thing. If the discussion is okay, we're going to see a sharp drop. But if the discussion is goes south, we are going to see a sharp increase. But be it as it may, we know that a $71 per barrel crude oil price is beneficial to Nigeria, because our benchmark is quite realistic this time. We have about 64.84 dollars per barrel, I think, is realistic. So we have about $6 to $7 to added to our crude SS crude accounts. So we have that in our SS crude account, and what that means to the economy. That's why we're seeing our naira appreciating the way it is, and it's going, and I think fiscal revenue for the government has also increased based on that. So I think it's a plus for us, whichever way. But I know even if there's a sharp decline, it's for this week, it's not going to decline below $64 per barrel. That time.
All right, definitely quite interesting. You mentioned the excess crude account. I guess that's one we need to track to see if there's some growth there, hopefully. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Foma Nwokolo. She's Assistant Vice President, Research, Financial Derivatives Company. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Ladi.